Networking is difficult because it isn't rocket science, but at the same time it is. You know what I mean? You have to be there, you have to be present, but the thing that they don't teach you in music school is that you have to be a good guy. You have to be fun to hang out with.
Welcome back to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe to the podcast, share us on social, and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Details to everything are available at our website, contrabassconversations.com. And today, we are featuring an interview with David White, who works as a bassist in the musical theater scene. David's based in New York City and is currently on tour with the Bridges of Madison County. And we talk about his time at the Berklee College of Music and working as a bassist on cruise ships for the Royal Caribbean, moving to New York City and getting involved with the musical theater scene, a week in the life of a theater musician, developing networking skills, and much more. We'll also play some excerpts from the Shirtwaist Sisters and their new EP. You're going to hear two tracks, the beginning and the end. First track is You're Gonna Leave. Second track is Take the G Train. And David just played the release party for this EP on July 6th at Rockwood Music Hall in New York. I had a great time talking with David. Great guy, and I know you'll enjoy this episode and learn a lot about what it's like playing musical theater professionally. Here we go.
You when you're feeling bad, build you up and say sweet things so you feel like a man. I don't wanna write a card saying how I feel. I don't wanna waste a stamp not knowing what's the deal, 'cause you're gonna leave. You're gonna leave. You're gonna leave me. I don't wanna hear how you've been working so damn hard, as if you're the only one marked by battle scars. I don't care to hear about the tests you have to take, while I cannot help but think I've made a huge mistake, 'cause you're gonna leave. You're gonna leave. You're gonna leave me. Don't tell me it's all in my head to think of the good times instead. I don't wanna picture you 1,000 miles away, living your new shiny life, new people every day. My last reserves of sympathy look like they're gonna drain. I'm sorry, but I can't keep on pretending it's the same, 'cause you're gonna leave. You're gonna leave. You're gonna leave me.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. And actually, what's funny is two things. One, I started as a drummer, and I swore I was going to be a hockey player. for a very long time. My mom is a choir teacher, and my dad is a lighting designer. So I kind of grew up around theater, and most of my family friends were involved in theater. But I never really thought about it until I was much older. I started playing drums. I grew up playing in church and all of that stuff. And I wanted to play percussion, but you had to play a year of a melodic instrument of some kind. And me being me, I saw the bass and was like, oh, that's the biggest thing. I want to play that. Yeah, I started in 6th grade, just kind of kept playing, was taking both percussion and bass very seriously. And then about halfway through high school, I kind of was like, I think bass is what I want to do, and was still playing hockey very seriously at that time, but was like, that's not what I want to see doing with my life. So I decided to go the much more safe route and become a freelance musician. Around that time was when I started to look at schools that weren't necessarily conservatories, because I didn't want to be a orchestral musician or a classical musician. So I started to look at places like USC, Frost, Berkeley, Belmont, all those kinds of places. And I went and did the 5-week program at Berkeley, which is basically a summer camp, except that you stay in the dorms and you're taught by Berkeley professors. So I went and did that. I believe that was before my junior year. And that was when I kind of decided, Berkeley was the place for me. And I auditioned very hard to get in there. And that's how I ended up there, moving as far away from Ohio as I could. Yeah.
Now, when did you start playing electric bass?
I started playing electric bass. Gosh, now I got to remember. That would have been somewhere in 7th grade. So I would have been 12, 13 at that point. I had just started playing upright in my school orchestra. So I was a reader, and my dad had an old electric sitting around. And one day I was watching MTV or something back when they still had music videos on. And I picked it up and just started kind of fiddling around with it, and started to take it more and more seriously. And my dad, being a hobby guitar player, was like, well, if you want to take this seriously, we should get you into lessons. Started taking lessons with a guy. His name was Robert Gage, back in Columbus. And I kind of fell in love with it really quick, which is kind of how theater came into the scene, was because I was playing upright very seriously, but I also really enjoyed playing electric. I like playing both. And kind of serendipitously, theater scenes are one of the few places where you kind of have to play both in order to survive, and you have to play both very well. So when I was about 14, the college that my dad taught at is called Otterbein University. They have a great theater program. At the time, the music program was kind of iffy. It's gotten a lot better since then, but they needed people to play for this children's show, and they couldn't really pay very much, and that whole kind of thing. And the music director knew my dad, knew that I was playing bass, knew that I played both upright and electric, and said, well, hey, does David want to work on this and play the show? And me, trying to impress everybody that was much older than me, said, absolutely, yeah. So I got the book, shed it as hard as I possibly could, came in, and that was my first theater gig, was playing You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And about that time was when I was like, wow, I really enjoy doing this, because I liked the people that theater attracted. I liked the environment. I also kind of enjoyed being a big part of a show, but not being the star. And it allowed me to play both upright and electric. So that was kind of it for me, was when I found that. I said, okay, I think this is what I want to do with my life, kind of thing. But I'm also very lucky that I found it that early.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and you did find it early. That's pretty cool to land an opportunity like that. 14.
Yeah, well, when you realize that, I had that moment the other day where I was like, wow, that was only 11 years ago.
So going into Berkeley, that's such a different environment than a lot of other music schools. How does that place kind of tie it all together? Like, what was that experience like?
Well, Berkeley is an interesting school. I should clarify that I only did 2 years. Very long story short, basically, I got to the point where I said, I'm gigging enough that I was like, you know what? I don't really want to spend another, $50,000 to get a piece of paper that says I know how to play the bass. And I know that sounds a little jaded, but that was what was going through my head at that time. Anyway, so when I first got in there, Berklee is much more obviously heavy on jazz and contemporary and rock music and has become very well respected in songwriting and music production circles. So when you get in there, there's much more of a focus on, if you're an upright guy, being a jazzer, and if you're electric guy, you kind of fall into one or two camps. You end up being kind of the like the bass virtuosos working on tapping and double thumbing and that kind of Victor Woot and Stu Ham world. Or you become, I'm Mr. Groove and I've bought every D'Angelo record and have transcribed it and, that kind of guy. But I didn't really fall into either one of those camps because I wanted to be fluent on as much stuff, and I also played upright. There weren't many guys who played both very well. Either it was you were an incredible upright player and kind of played electric, or you played electric really, really well and kind of played upright. And because I had the classical background playing in youth symphony and stuff, Berklee has a great film scoring program. So I ended up playing in a lot of those film scoring sessions because I could play with a bow, which is a whole other conversation entirely, that there weren't many guys that could play with a bow. But at that time, Berklee was not very well equipped to be able to handle a guy that kind of wanted to do everything on both electric and upright. They've since I've left there, I believe next year they're merging with BOCO, Boston Conservatory. So they're bringing in more people that can focus on your technique and excerpts, but are also able to teach you some improv and things like that. So I think the people that are going to go through there now are going to end up being much more well-rounded as far as bassists are concerned. But at that time, there wasn't anybody really there that was being like, okay, here's Beethoven 5 and here's some different fingerings, kind of thing. So that I didn't discover until later in life. But good things about Berklee was I ended up playing so many different genres and with so many different people and getting to work in studios a lot, getting used to kind of having to play under the gun and come up with things very quickly. Yeah, Berklee was a great experience, but at the same time, it was not a place that I would go if you're looking for a very structured kind of education. They're very much in the sense of like, okay, well, you do this very well, so here's some people that kind of do that, but go off and do your own thing. It's much more of an artist collective than it is a school. It's much more set up to be kind of work on your own thing, bring it in, have some people talk to you about it, then go back and work on it some more. In that sense, it's good, but if you're looking for a place where you're like, okay, I need you to work on these etudes this week, and I need you to work on this excerpt this week, or the jazz equivalent of that, I need you to learn these tunes, that's not the place for you. It's much more, we kind of nurture what you already know, and we'll challenge you, but we're not going to be like, this is the Berklee way to do things. And that works for some people. It wasn't for me. I think looking back at my school, if I had known more about how I worked, I would probably end up trying to go for a conservatory because there's a part of me that needs somebody to go, you need to do X, Y, and Z because that's going to make you better kind of thing.
So you're there for a couple of years, and what kind of work were you doing in Boston outside of school at that point?
Boston, first off, Boston is an incredible city. It's not a great music city. What I found myself doing, especially more in my second year, was I was commuting down to New York a lot more for gigs. So like I said, a lot during that time, I was ending up doing a lot of film scoring sessions, and there's a big music production department at Berklee. So I ended up playing on a lot of those sessions. Through that, I ended up meeting some friends, and we formed this rock pop band called The Fates. We did some shows, and then we put a record out. So we were promoting that. I was also in a cover band with actually a few of the guys that were in The Fates, playing actually basement parties for dorms, which was an interesting experience. It was kind of a anything and everything. You ended up playing blues gigs. You also ended up playing some straight ahead dinner sets for fancy parties. So Boston was one of those places where there's not much in the way of an original music scene. What there is Berklee guys who need places to play in front of audience members, and it's Berklee kids playing for other Berklee kids, at some of those clubs. And then you get the national touring acts that are coming through. So as far as it being a hive, most people work there for a few years and then end up moving to a different city. So there's not many guys that make their living in Boston. But all that being said, it's a cliche, but I really was kind of doing a little bit of everything as far as gigs in Boston. Anywhere between blues and rock to playing classical stuff to anything.
And then is that when you started doing the cruise ship gig after Berkeley? How did that all?
I had been thinking about leaving school about halfway through my second year. I was getting a little disenfranchised with it, and I found myself, sorry, Dad, to skipping classes just because I didn't want to go. So I was like, all right, my lessons were great, and I had a really good teacher, Dave Buddha, who was like, listen, man, school's always going to be here. If you want to go and play, go play. And then one day I saw a posting for Royal Caribbean was coming in to do auditions for the musicians. And it was like, some Saturday morning. And I signed up and, didn't think too much of it. Came in and they had me play a piece on upright and a piece on electric. I can't remember what I played for the life of me. And then they had me do some sight reading. And I passed the audition. And they emailed me and said, hey, we'd love to have you. What does your schedule look like? And this was near the end of the year. And I had that conversation with my parents where I was like, I don't think this is working for me, but I want to go play. And bless them, they were as supportive as they could be. It's never fun to get a call from your son that says, hey, I don't think college is really my thing. I think I want to do something else. But, they were very supportive. And I emailed the guy back and said, all right, I can, come September when school and summer's out and I've moved out of my apartment, I'll be ready to go. And he said, okay, great. Can you do 9 months? And me not knowing any better said, absolutely, I'll be there. And, I didn't even know what the schedule was. So when he told me, he's like, oh, okay, you'll fly to Barcelona on this date. I was like, oh, all right, cool. Guess I better update my passport. Yeah. And that began the cruise ship gig. So I did that for about 9 months. Came back and stayed with my parents for a few months, basically kind of getting my life back in order. And that's right after that was when I moved to New York. So that would have been 2012 when I moved.
Maybe take people through a week in the life on a cruise ship gig. What's that look like in terms of what you're playing and just how that, or for you, how that all worked?
Well, for one thing, it depends on the length of the actual cruise. Some cruises are 7 days, some cruises are 12. Every once in a while, when you have to relocate, you'll do a very long cruise where it's like 24 days. At least the way that Royal Caribbean works, there's what are called production shows. Those are the shows that are made by Royal Caribbean that you play for every cruise that comes through. For my ship, it's called Brilliance of the Seas. For my ship, there was 3 different shows. There was a tango show, which was actually kind of fun because I was in the orchestra, in air quotes, on the ship. It was really a dance band. The tango show had a tango couple and then a tango orchestra. So it was a guy playing bandoneon, a piano player, a drummer, and all these guys were Argentinian, but they didn't travel with a bass player, so they had to use me. So that was kind of fun having to learn that genre and also not speaking Spanish. There was a lot of just kind of having to play through things and being like, oh, okay, I get what they're going for. So we did that show for every cruise. We also did another show called Center Stage, which was basically a 90-minute medley of rock songs that everybody knew. And that had the cast and dancers in it. And then for the life of me, I can't remember what the name of the last show was, but that one we were in the actual pit of the theater, and it was like a Broadway medley. So, we'd have 5 minutes of a Mamma Mia medley and then another 5 minutes of a Cole Porter medley and all that kind of stuff. So those 3 shows we played on every cruise. And generally those would be parceled out about every 2 or 3 days, depending on the length of the cruise. We would do, a Royal Caribbean show. In between that, we would have what we would call either fly-ons or guest artists. And those were people that would come in and just do their one show for that cruise. And those changed about every week or so. So you get about 3 different fly-on artists. And those could range from a juggler to a Motown review to an Elton John tribute show, anything and everything. And those days were kind of fun because you show up for rehearsal at about 4:00. You've only got an hour. So you tip and tail everything. You play the intro, you look at the roadmap, you play any spots that look weird and scary, and then you go to the next chart. And you've got about an hour, you get through all that. They go, okay, see you all at curtain. You get about 2 hours to go shower, eat, change into your tux or blacks, depending on the show. And then you play the show twice in front of an audience. And sometimes there were charts that we didn't even play through that I was playing for the first time in front of people. So I thought my sight reading chops were pretty good until I got on the cruise ship and realized it's that grace under fire kind of thing. Now, to be fair, when you get the Motown review, most everybody's played Higher and Higher or, My Girl at some point. So you kind of know how the song's going to go. But then, you'll get thrown for a loop. We'd get Sir Duke, which the original's in B, but this person wanted it in B flat. So you get that big unison line in the middle of it, and you know it by heart, but then you go, oh, wait, this is down a half step. So then you're trying to think through everything, and of course there's an audience there, and you're like, man, I hope I don't screw this up. So, yeah, that's kind of – the cruise ship gig it's really good for that kind of thing. You also have a lot of time to woodshed. You also have a lot of time to go sightseeing if that's your thing. But as far as the work is concerned, we would do those shows, the production show, the fly-on show. And then depending on the cruise company, normally you'll also have to play like a big band set, or we had to play a jazz set with two of the singers at the end of each cruise. So every 7 or 12 days, we would go up in the fancy lounge and go do our show up there. So you don't really have a day off. It's pretty rare. Every once in a while, you'll get a fly-on artist who's like a comedian, and then you don't have to work. But invariably, because there's nothing else to do, you end up going to see the show anyways. It's difficult and challenging, but I got to say it really taught me a lot about always kind of having to play your best no matter what the situation is. And it really gets your sight reading chops in order because you just have to. They don't have time to play through every chart and make sure that you're good and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the cruise ship. The cruise ship gig is a good one, but it is very stressful at certain times.
What a great set of skills to develop, like you were saying, too, like having all that music thrown at you. And yeah, but I'm sure it made your sight reading a ton better. And those are probably skills that transferred over really well into the theater world. And so you're in New York, you come back and you regroup and you're in New York. And how did getting tied into the scene there, the theater scene, how did that unfold for you?
Well, I kind of I moved to New York with the intention of getting into the theater scene. I had played shows growing up and kind of said to myself, okay, I think that's what I want to do with my life. And if that's what you want to do, you've really only got an option. If you want to play Broadway, you have to be in New York, period. And then the only other, relatively big theater scene is in Chicago. And I said, I had some family that lived in Naperville, and I said, I don't think Chicago is the place for me. So I wanted to go to New York. And I also said to myself, well, if I even have an inkling, I should try it because I'm going to regret it if I don't at least give it a shot. So I moved to New York and joined 802. And when you join 802, you get the big book that has everybody there. And I just started being that annoying kid and emailing everybody that I could get, that I could get on the phone or on the computer rather. And just started being like, hey, can I buy you coffee? Can I pick your brain? Can I do all this stuff? And, some people responded and some people didn't. They're allowed to. And from there, I just kind of started fostering relationships and friendships with those guys and ended up getting hooked up more and more in the theater scene. And it's a hard line to walk with making sure that people know that you're there and available, but you're not bugging anyone. I just kind of started emailing everybody, trying to watch as many books as I could to kind of see what the vibe was like in a Broadway pit and, seeing what it's like having to play the same show for years and years at a time, getting to know different terms and how union rules worked and what in-house contractors were and, different fee structures and all that kind of stuff that no one tells you until you have been around the block enough and you go, oh, okay, that's how that worked, was what I kind of started asking those guys. And because I started to get to know some higher level players, they ended up going, well, I can't really do this gig, or the opposite. I don't really want to do this gig, but there's this young guy that I sticks in my head. Why don't you give him a call? And through that was kind of how I ended up getting some more touring work and subbing work, and how I ended up now on Bridges was just because I knew Randy Landau, the guy who played it on Broadway, and he's been nice enough to kind of take me under his wing and show me some of the ropes. And I heard the tour was going out, and I very politely said, hey, if you hear anything, I really appreciate, you tossing my hat in the ring. And he said, absolutely. And got a call out of the blue from the contractor for the tour and said, Randy recommended you. And I said, yeah, absolutely. When do you need me, kind of thing. So yeah, the theater scene, I mean, freelancing in general is all about relationships, but the theater scene specifically is really about developing friendships and basically being able to be trusted and counted on. Because with subbing, you go and you watch the book, which means you basically sit behind the guy who has the chair. You watch him play the show, and he goes, okay, great. Any questions? And, you can ask away. And then he sends you a PDF or a paper copy of the book. And then we'll generally send you a camera feed of the conductor, and you go home, you learn it. Maybe you watch him play the show one more time, and then they go, okay, I'll let you know when I need you, kind of thing. And you're basically expected to go in and play exactly like they play it every single night. So it's high stress, but like I said, with having to be counted on, that's a big thing. You've got to be a nice guy, you've got to be able to fit in, but you've also got to play the book exactly how he plays it, or she rather. Yeah, that's why theater is kind of hard, because you have to find the right people who can kind of hang, but at the same time know how theater works.
Man, that's such a unique skill set, and the pressure to go in, because you're going into one of these shows to sub, and like I'm sure you subbed in some shows they've done hundreds, if not maybe thousands, depending on the show, of performances. So like you just get so used to the player playing it a certain way every night.
Well, I mean, and it's not just the other musicians, it's the cast and creative people as well. It's part of the reason a lot of shows end up using click tracks is so that it's exactly the same every single night. And I know that to people that are outside the business, that sounds so monotonous, but at the same time, theater is so much of basically trying to recreate, magic as much as possible every single night. Because, there's a theater full of people who have never seen the show before. So the goal is to get it as close to perfection as many times as possible. So you really do have to play the same every single night. There is some room for improvisation on some shows, but it's few and far between. What I will say, as far as playing the same music every night, what I enjoy about it is it's almost kind of zen in a way. Playing the same stuff every night really allows you to be able to try new gear, try a new fingering for that thing. Say I'm working on some open hand technique stuff, and I'm like, you know what, that might be good in there. Or, you know what, I'm really going to focus on the second trumpet part tonight because I've never really checked out those harmonies. Or whatever, the guys that say they get bored, I don't think they're not built for theater, for one. But two, it annoys me when people say that, because I say, well, then you're not paying attention. If you're bored, that means your head isn't in the show, your head isn't in the job, and it's like, okay, maybe you need a break. But I really enjoy it because, I can play 300 shows and they can all be completely different. Yes, I'm still playing Q17 is still going to sound exactly the same every night. But, the tempo might change a little bit if you're not on a click. There might be an understudy on who's going to take something a little different. Somebody might drop a line. Who knows what's going to happen with so many balls kind of up in the air. So I enjoy it, but it's definitely not for everybody in that sense.
I've had very limited theater experience, but I
I did play Forever Plaid for about a year. And for me, so that's the only thing I've done that got into the hundreds, And anytime there was someone subbing in on piano or someone subbing in the cast, or you had a different kind of audience, you had and those moments all of a sudden became so fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, and the thing with touring was we were just in Kansas City and we played an outdoor theater, which was a trip in and of itself, but it was 10,000 seats. It was the Starlight Theater. And it's the kind of theater you go to see Michael McDonald or Paul Simon, adult contemporary, but they had our show. And the thing about Bridges of Madison County is it is on purpose a very small kind of insular show, but we're playing to a 10,000 seat audience. So even if there's 5,000 people out there, all you hear is, very quiet applause. And you just go, okay, I hope someone's watching this because I feel like I'm playing for no one right now. But then, we had our opening night last night here in Minneapolis, and the audience was great. They loved it, and it was sold really, really well. And that's kind of fun with seeing how different audiences react to different things and what jokes really land in what city and all that kind of stuff. So that keeps it interesting.
Now, how long are you in a show that you're on the road with, like Bridges of Madison County or other things you've done? How long are you typically in a particular city before moving on? Maybe take us through a week or a couple weeks.
It changes drastically from each show. There are some shows that are really big sellers that sit down for months at a time. Lion King is going to sit down in any given city for 5 or 6 weeks. But then there's our show where we tend to sit down for a week or two at a time. So I'll take you through what a normal week has been recently. Mondays are almost always off. Those are travel days, which quite frankly, travel days can be just as exhausting as a performance day because, you could be going from Phoenix to Fort Lauderdale. Or, you might be busing from Tempe to Las Vegas or something. So generally on Monday, you get up and either there's a bus that will take you to the airport or we, in certain cities, Reader's Digest version, in certain cities, if the hotel is farther than I believe it's a half a mile from the theater, they have to give us rental cars. So you get up, you return the rental car, you get on the bus, and you go to the airport, get on the flight with 30 other people, get to the next town, get all your stuff unpacked, get to the hotel, and that's your day, basically. Tuesday is always opening in the new city. You have to do whatever you want during the morning, and then you'll load into the theater 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, what I mean by load in is the percussion and the piano and the chairs are all set up. Basically, you just go and unpack your instrument, get it all plugged in. I'm very anal retentive, so I get there super early because I like to tape down my cables and all that stuff. So you do that, and then about 5:30, depending on the show, you do a sound check, and the orchestra will play through a couple of things from the show to give them a balance of the band, and then they'll bring the cast in, and you'll do a few different numbers with the cast. And during that time, the cast is also getting what they call a walkthrough through the theater. So if there's a weird entrance or they have to walk through the house up to the stage or something, or there's some weird crossover, that all happens during that time. And, our stage manager is constantly on a phone or something, just kind of hollering at everybody all the time. So you do about an hour sound check, and then you get an hour before the show to eat and change into your blacks, and then you play the show for a new audience. The nice thing about that is that after Tuesday, the kind of craziness of Tuesday, you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to kind of do whatever you want. So you get all of Wednesday morning you get off. You can go explore the city or hang in your hotel room if you want. You get the same Thursday, same Friday. Then we generally tend to have 2 shows Saturday and 2 shows Sunday. So that's, your weekends are kind of eaten up. But yeah, you close the show Sunday, pack up all your stuff, go back to the hotel, pack up your suitcase, and you get ready to go to the next city again on Monday. Now, that obviously changes if you're in the city for longer than a week, but the schedule is pretty much the same. You'll almost always have Monday off, and then you go and play 8 shows. And, yeah, that's kind of the life. You end up living in hotel rooms, living out of a suitcase. You get really creative with cooking things with hot water, and and lots of ramen noodles and things of that sort. But you end up finding your same routine that you would back home. You wake up around the same time, you work out around the same time, that kind of stuff. You just happen to not be home. But it can become very tedious if you're in a city that doesn't have a lot to do immediately around your hotel. There's also the thing with trying to share a car between 5 or 6 people can be a little frustrating at sometimes, but yeah, it's also the downsides are so minuscule compared to what your job actually is. You have those moments here and there where you go, wow, I'm getting paid to sit on a beach, and then all I have to do later is just go play the show. It's like what a cool life. The downsides are also big too. I have my girlfriend back in New York, and we don't get to see each other that much. We FaceTime as much as we can. You're not in the city, so trying to kind of keep those connections with the guys in New York when you're away is difficult. So, there's definitely upsides and downsides, but for me, the upsides are much, much greater than the downs.
You mentioned gear a little while back and getting there and taping down your gear and everything, and taping down your cables. I'd love to hear what, in terms of both acoustic and electric, maybe just what are you playing on these days in a theater setting?
Well, this gets into a funny story. So I have to mention Upton Bass in Connecticut, because you'll see why when I tell you this story. Those guys have really bailed me out, and Eric specifically has become a good friend. He's a very, very nice guy. The story of my upright is kind of long, but I'll keep it as short as I can. My grandmother, who I was very close with, passed away before my senior year of high school. And she was always a very big supporter of me playing, and she always came to every concert, was the loudest cheerleader. Anyway, when she passed away, she was kind enough to leave money for me to be able to purchase a professional instrument. And for a long time, I had been looking around trying to find some stuff. And I said, I really like these vintage instruments, but, I didn't want to spend 30, 40 grand on something that I just kind of liked. So just kind of searching, I stumbled upon Upton, and I said, you know what, I think I want to get a new instrument built, something to my specifications. And it was also an intensely personal process for me because of the history with my grandmother. Anyway, I went to them, and they bent over backwards to make this beautiful 7/8 bass. And I had gotten it, and I was playing a tour of Guys and Dolls, and I set it on a chair, and my foot got caught in a cable, and down she went, and I cracked off the entire scroll. Now, the funny thing was, I happened to be in New London, Connecticut, which is about 6 miles down the road from their shop. So Dave, who runs their website, ran over, gave me a rental bass, took my damaged bass, went away with it, and fixed it up. You would think that's the end of the story, but it's not. So I got the new instrument back after I had dried all my tears. I got her back. She was as good as new. And I brought her on the Bridges tour. And I have her in a big Colstein's case. And in the process of it getting shipped from Dayton, Ohio to Fayetteville, Arkansas, it got a really, really nasty hit from behind, cracked through the case. Right where the button is at the neck got cracked. The neck came out of the body, and the top rib cracked. So that's the second time that it had gotten basically demolished. And again, dried my tears and said, okay, how do we fix this? Sent it up to Connecticut, and unfortunately they said, look, it's beyond what we can do. In the process with that, I said, okay, well, let's get a travel instrument built. So I use Upton basses. I love them. But at the moment, I'm waiting for a new instrument to get built. In the process of all of this, I had talked to Barry Colstein and said, I don't know what to do. I need a rental bass, but it can't just be a plywood because of the nature of the show. I need something that can kind of have the orchestral resonance. I had talked to Barry, and he's like, well, I have some basses here that you could use. Just let me know. Come to the shop. We'll get you hooked up, all that stuff. and he really saved me in that respect. He rented me. I can't remember for the life of me what the model bass is, but it's one of his new basses that he's been working with a shop in Hungary. They do a bunch of the work over there, and then they send it to get finished at the shop on Long Island. He got me that, a bow, and a flight case for that bass. And at the moment, that's my rental bass, and I'm waiting for Upton to finish building the new one. So the short answer to the upright question is I play Uptons when I can, unless they're completely demolished. So that's the bass. When I'm touring, I normally put it in a Colstein's case just because I have a relationship with Barry, and he's been incredibly kind. It's also really helpful to have the suspension they have inside those cases. As far as pickups go, I use a Realist. On this show, it goes from the pickup into an Avalon U5 DI, which is a tube DI. It's got a nice, beautiful, warm sound. And then on top of that, they're using, I can't remember the mic, but they're also miking my instrument as well. For my electric on this show, it's actually incredibly simple. I've just got a passive Fender 5-string. It goes from that into a radial tone bone. I EQ it a little bit, and then I send it to the front of the house. And then I have a small Hartkey sidekick to use as a monitor, because this show is rare in the sense that we don't use any conductor cams and we don't use any Avioms, headphones for monitoring ourselves. It's all acoustic. But, when I play an electric instrument, I have to be able to hear myself. All of that, both my electric and my acoustic, go into DIs and then return to me. I use a Boss, I believe it's the LS2. It's a line switcher pedal, basically an AD, but I like it because I can control the gain, because the upright is really hot, the electric is not. And then I can switch between that, and then it goes from that to my amp so that I can hear both the electric and the upright. And that's actually an incredibly simple setup. Some of the shows that I end up playing on, you've got a whole pedal board, and you've got 3 or 4 different instruments that you're switching between, and you've also got Avioms and in-ears to work with, and you've got a click, and you've got to watch a camera. So it's sometimes can be very high-tech. It's nice to be in a pit where, it's all acoustic, and I can play with real string players, and it's not a keyboard. We can work on phrasing and musicality and things like that.
Man, what a massive contrast between all these different kinds of gigs. Like, you got something where you got a pedal board, and you got all that, and you're in-ears and conductor cam versus the more acoustic. What a fascinating, you never know what you're going to get long-term.
Well, it's funny. My very first tour was Hair, the hippie musical. That show, I was in costume. I had a paisley shirt and a peace medallion and a headband. Oh, I looked ridiculous. And then the band was on stage, but my perch was on top of the cab of a 57 Chevy pickup. So I'm about 8 feet up in the air, and that show, I had a small pedal board, and, that was all like rock and funk, and, it's the hippie musical. Had to play some stuff with a pick and all that kind of stuff. And then the next tour right after that was Guys and Dolls, which is, the biggest golden age musical of all time, where I'm just playing root fifth. And I was like, the amount of contrast between just those two shows is so drastic. And then it goes on from there. But that's the thing about theaters. You kind of never know what you're going to get. And you kind of have to be fluent in so many different styles to be able to meld it into that show. One tune will be Latin, the next tune's rock, and the next tune's a waltz. And it's like you got to be able to play all of it accordingly. But that's what I love about theater. It's you never get bored.
We also dig a little more into the topic of networking and how David has approached this and what's been helpful for him in his career. And by the way, be sure to check out David at his website, davidwhitebass.com.
I mean, I loved how you just described also like the way you networked. I mean, you just like got in touch. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's that balance, of like, you got to make yourself known, but you don't want to be obnoxious about it either.
So networking is difficult because it isn't rocket science, but at the same time it is. You know what I mean? You have to be there, you have to be present. But the thing that they don't teach you in music school is that you have to be a good guy. You have to be fun to hang out with, because people notice and they won't hire you if you're a jerk. It's a very difficult line to walk, and especially the thing you have to realize with subbing is, I'm young, I'm 25, so the guys that have chairs have been in the city for upwards of 20 years. So obviously along that time, they've built up friendships with other guys, and they're going to be ahead of you on the sub list thing. So when you're somebody young and is relatively new in town, well, you have to be hyper aware of who you are. You have to be there and willing to pick people's brains and kind of willing to learn as much as you can, but also not start questioning, well, why don't I have this gig yet? Or blah, blah, blah. Because the realization is you're in New York, everybody can play. It's not because they're a better player than you. It's because they have a relationship with so-and-so, or, oh, that guy really helped me out when I went away and he had to watch my dog. You know what I mean? There's all that kind of stuff that that doesn't even factor into playing. It's just the relationships you have with those kinds of guys. And the other thing you got to realize as far as Broadway goes, like Richard Hammond, the thing you got to realize about him is he's got probably 30 guys a week emailing him asking if he can sub or whatever, because he's on a hit show. And you've got to realize that you kind of have to stay above the fray, because they're getting emails every week from this dude. Some guy who's like, I'm the baddest bass player in whatever town, and I think I should have this gig, and blah, blah, blah. And that's not the way to go about it, obviously, but it does take a while to learn how to bridge the gap between being a fellow musician who wants to sub and get work, because the guys that you're contacting know exactly what you're doing, but you also want to be friendly with them. You want to be able to develop a relationship, and you want to be able to go out to coffee with them and hang and not talk about music, because that's how they're going to get to know you as another human being. It's not about showing up and being like, wow, Hamilton's huge. What's that like? And that's all you talk about. You want to talk about, I don't know, your favorite beer or the Mets or whatever, That's really the trick that I found to networking. And, I'm by no means great at it. I don't think many musicians are, but it's all about not being a jerk. My mom has retired from teaching, but in her choir room, she had one rule. There was a big sign up above her chalkboard that said DBAJ, don't be a jerk. And I've always stuck with that. I was like, that's really the only rule to network, is just don't be a jerk, don't overstep your bounds, and you'll probably be okay.
Baby, take the train to me. The G has been running efficiently, or you could walk all the way to me. Baby, take the train to me. The G has been running efficiently, or you could walk all the way to me. It's not that far if you get started now. You'll take the train to me. The G has been running efficiently, or you could walk all the way to me. She has been running efficiently, or you could walk all the way to me. Baby, take the train to me. The G